Tonight, on First at 9 this Thursday the 10th of July 2025. Revised tariffs. The United States announces a 30% reciprocal tariff rate on imports from Sri Lanka, down from the earlier 44%. Sri Lanka's 14 percentage point reduction, the highest for any nation so far. Fresh negotiations. Sri Lanka to continue to engage with the United States to explore the possibility of further tariff reduction. Another round of discussions with the US Trade Office scheduled for next week, reveals senior economic advisor to the president. Sri Lanka is satisfied with the progress of discussions so far, but will push for more favourable outcomes, central bank governor affirms. Tread with caution. Experts urge caution in taxing digital services as US President threatens additional tariffs in response to potential trade retaliation. High seas chaos. Israel-bound cargo ship sunk by Yemen's Houthis in the Red Sea. Kidnapped crews rescued after a tense operation.
Enrolling now for the June 2025 intake and complete your degree in 2 years.
Men are the tools. Javinta,
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome. You're joining First at 9 on Sri Lanka's most trusted news source, Derana. I'm Tharindu Mahendra, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. In your top story this evening, the United States announced a 30% reciprocal tariff rate on imports from Sri Lanka, down from the earlier 44%. The 14 percentage point reduction Sri Lanka received is the highest for any nation so far. In a letter addressed to Sri Lankan President Anura Dissanayake, US President Donald Trump said the rate could be further revised if Sri Lanka removes tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade, and warned any increase in tariffs against the US would be reciprocated. On the 2nd of April, which he dubbed Liberation Day in America, US President Donald Trump announced a bevy of reciprocal tariffs on over 100 countries with rates as high as 50%. Washington said the measure was aimed at counterbalancing what it described as unfair trade practices. A 10% universal tariff rate was imposed on all foreign imports, while additional tariff rates were based on the country's trade deficit with the United States, with those with higher deficits facing higher tariffs. Sri Lanka, which had a nearly 88% trade deficit with the US, was hit with a 44% tariff, placing it among the 10 countries facing the highest tariff rates and the highest in South Asia. However, following diplomatic appeals, the Trump administration suspended the imposition of the tariffs for 90 days, during which only a baseline 10% tariff would apply. During this period, several countries initiated negotiations with the US in hopes of reducing their tariff rates. Although the 90-day grace period was originally set to expire yesterday, the US administration said it would be extended until the 1st of August. However, President Trump began issuing tariff notifications to countries outlining the revised tariff rates. In a letter addressed to President Anura Dissanayake last night, the US announced that Sri Lanka's revised tariff rate would be 30%. This is a reduction of 14 percentage points from the earlier 44%. However, in his letter, US President Trump highlights that the 30% figure is far less than what is needed to eliminate Sri Lanka's trade deficit with the US, and warns that if Sri Lanka raises its tariffs on US imports, the US would reciprocate it by adding that figure onto the 30% tariff rate currently in place. Trump added that if Sri Lanka wishes to open heretofore closed trading markets to the US and eliminate tariff and non-tariff policies and trade barriers, the US would consider an adjustment to the tariff rate. He also pointed out that the tariffs may be modified upward or downward depending on America's relationship with Sri Lanka. Among the 22 countries whose revised tariff rates have been announced thus far, Sri Lanka has secured the highest reduction of 14 percentage points from 44 to 30%. Myanmar, which was also hit with a 44% tariff in the April 2nd announcement, was only able to reduce its tariff rate to 40%. Cambodia received the second largest reduction of tariff rate of 13 percentage points from 49 to 36%. Among Sri Lanka's other Asian competitors in the US market, Bangladesh is facing a 35% tariff rate, while Brunei faces 25% tariffs, Indonesia 32%, Laos 40%, Malaysia 25%, the Philippines 20% and Thailand 36%. 26%. Japan and South Korea are both facing 25% tariffs despite maintaining a trade surplus with the US. Notably, the Trump administration is yet to announce the revised tariff rates on China, India, the United Kingdom and the European Union. Meanwhile, the members of the BRICS group of nations are facing the threat of another 10% tariff in addition to their primary rate. Trump threatened Brazil with a 50% tariff, accusing it of attacks on US tech companies and of conducting a witch hunt against former President Jair Bolsonaro, who is facing prosecution over his alleged role in a plot to overturn the 2022 election. Responding in a social media post, Brazilian President Lula said an increase in tariffs on Brazil would be reciprocated and warned against any interference in the nation's judicial system. Meanwhile, Lesotho, which was hit by a 50% tariff in the April 2nd announcement, the highest among all countries, declared a national state of disaster over the country's high rates of youth unemployment and job losses and uncertainty over the revised US tariff rate it would receive. Unemployment in Lesotho stands at 30%, but for young people the rate is almost 50%. Deputy Prime Minister Ntomeng Majara said the state of disaster would be in force until June 30th, 2027. Against this backdrop, Sri Lankan President Anura Dissanayake today chaired a special discussion on the new US tariff policy. The meeting was attended by Deputy Minister of Economic Development Professor Anil Jayantha, Finance Secretary Dr. Harshana Surya Peruma, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Secretary to the Ministry of Trade K.A. Vimalanthi Raja and Senior Economic Advisor to the President Duminda Hulangamua.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Yadia, ලොව වැඩියෙන්ම අලෙවි වන ඉලෙක්ට්‍රික් ස්කූටරය Avance Auto වෙතින්.
Meanwhile, government officials stated that despite the recent tariff reduction, Sri Lanka will continue to engage with the United States to explore the possibility of reducing the 30% reciprocal tariffs further. Senior Economic Advisor to the President Duminda Hulangamua, speaking at a press briefing today, said another round of discussions with the US Trade Office is scheduled for next week. He added that Sri Lanka is not considering retaliatory measures in response to the US tariffs.
What is going to be the President's response to President Trump's letter?
Our approach is to engage continuously in the discussion, in the negotiation. There's a time period that has been provided until 1st August. So our approach is to make use of this time, this space, to the best possible advantage of Sri Lanka and to have a mutual beneficial outcome both for USA and for Sri Lanka as well.
Can we say that for the moment you're okay with 30%, but you expect some more as you go along before the next deadline of August 1st?
We recognize we have made the significant good progress in the process so far. Obviously, we want to make more progress going forward. In terms of competitiveness, we are satisfied where we are now. And progress we have made from 44% 34, I think we are satisfied with that. But we need to make more progress. That's why we continue to engage with them.
There could be a reduction in the demand. We won't be able to export the same kind of volume what we have been doing. So what is the impact on the grassroots level?
It is premature for us to factor that and how many employment losses, all these things, how many for Sri Lanka. It's uncertain and also difficult to estimate because it's a global phenomenon.
Have we identified the alternatives for this? The time frame we want to kind of shift from US to another destination?
Shifting from one destination to another is not something that can happen overnight. It is a long drawn out effort because the price in the market, demands market, qualities, all that are different from one market to the other. As a government, yes, we have not gone that far yet because we feel that we should be able to reach a favorable conclusion in this negotiation process. So shifting from one to the other is not that easy. I mean, we are talking of a $3.5 billion market size. But that diversification should happen irrespective of tariff in my view. I mean, once we identify the risk markets, I guess the manufacturers will start now taking into account this risk that we face and de-risk this by diversifying the market.
So what are the countries you consider to be your main competitors in the US market?
The composition of goods that we export to the US now, we think our biggest competition for garments is coming from countries like India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia. That is for mass market products. But Sri Lankan garments is a niche market. So therefore we have some level of protection in terms of the duty and the pricing structure. But still overall our competition comes from those countries, and that is why we need to make sure the tariff structure that we get is competitive with those countries. We have not stopped at 30%. In fact, it's a daily discussion. Next week we are engaging back with the USTR and the discussion is ongoing. And our intention is to see that Sri Lanka gets the best rate.
What have we agreed to And are there any other areas that you're still looking further in these negotiations that made the US change the 44% to bring it down to 30%?
There's nothing has been agreed or pledged so far. It's a process of negotiation where we offer what we can offer and they offer what they can offer. And they ask, these are the regulations you need to relax. We say whether we agree or not.
What are you doing to address these other issues? Because it's not only negotiation, like the electricity costs, for an example.
These kind of advantage, disadvantage will prevail forever between countries. But in spite of that, we have been able to grow. Things that are within the government's control, we are trying to address and try to reduce the electricity costs, etc.
There are constraints for the Sri Lankan industries and the exporters or the traders. Now Sri Lanka need to ensure the policy consistency that is prevailing now. Second one, we are trying to see that coming out with the national tariff policy that is coming out, remove this all biased, export bias. We are coming out from the compartmentalized thinking pattern to some sort of a national and a global framework within which most of the barriers will be addressed.
ට්‍රම්ප් ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ ලිපියේ සඳහන් වෙනවා මේකාව ඉදිරියේදී බදු ඉහළ දැමීමක් සිදු කරොත් මේ ගැන අපව ඉර්ධියේ බදු ඉහළ දම්මන බවට ඒ ගැන ඔබතුමාලා මොන විදිය තැනකද ඉන්නේ?
ඉතින් අපි එහෙම බලාපොරොත්තුවක් නැහැ ඒක රිටැලියේට් කරන්න. එහෙම කරොත් මේ මාර්ගේ යන්න බැහැනේ.
අපේ තීරුබඩු විරුද්ධ සම්පූර්ණයෙන් විමර්ශනයට භාජනය කරලා සමාලෝචනය කරලා ඉදිරියේදී යනවා වෙනස්කම් කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
අපේ තියෙන තීරුබඩු ව්‍යුහය තම සංකීර්ණයි. එතකොට
our current tariff structure is quite complex. We can improve the efficiency of imports and exports by simplifying existing tariffs, para-tariffs and non-tariff barriers. We have submitted recommendations in this regard and I believe that simplifying the system is something the government is actively working on as part of a long-term strategy.
දීර්ඝකාලීන ක්‍රියාවලියක එක දෙයක්.
Meanwhile, voicing the opinion of the apparel sector, the industry most affected by the US tariffs, Secretary General of the Joint Apparel Association Forum, Johan Lawrence, warned that there is a risk of US businesses shifting away from Sri Lanka as some competitor countries benefit from significantly lower tariff rates. Commenting on the government's potential response to mitigate the impact of the new US tariffs, economist Talal Rafi emphasized that eliminating para-tariffs and reducing duties on US goods should be immediate priorities.
Reciprocal tariff on Sri Lanka is particularly worrying for the apparel sector. Main concern is that competitors like Vietnam have a much lower tariff rate of 20%, and if this is where we end up, then we will see a migration of US business from Sri Lanka into countries like Vietnam. Having said which, we're also conscious that there is still a window of opportunity open for negotiation, and we are encouraged by the fact that the government has come out very quickly confirming that they will be engaging in discussions with the USTR to see if we can negotiate a better result than current 30%. We look forward to working closely with the government and supporting them in this endeavour as we work together to get to a solution that will benefit Sri Lanka.
Meanwhile, commenting on the newly announced US tariffs on Sri Lanka, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce said the reduction in the tariff is a constructive and important first step by the Sri Lankan government toward bringing Sri Lanka's tariff structure for exports to the US closer to that of regional competitors. The Ceylon Chamber reiterated its support for the government's progress in achieving a further reduction aimed at strengthening Sri Lanka's position in the market, maintaining buyer confidence, and supporting sustained trade growth over the long term. Meanwhile, economist Talal Rafi commented on the immediate actions the government should take in view of this development.
If we do get a better deal than most of our neighbors, this sort of an increase in tariffs is going to result in a reduction in demand for apparel and other goods from the US. So anyway, exports is expected to reduce. But at the same time, if the global economy is going to slow down, oil prices could also come down. So our current account deficit may not see that much of a hit on that front. But what can the government do before the 1st of August would be, one thing I would say is eliminating para-tariffs on American goods. Reducing para-tariffs is anyway part of the IMF program requirements. On the other front, what I would say is we should be very careful about this digital tax of 18% because it's mostly going to affect American companies like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, AWS. And since most tech companies are quite close to the Trump administration, we don't want to see a retaliation on that front. Trump has clearly said that if any country puts any new taxes on American products or services, he's going to retaliate with an addition. Because at the end of the day, it's just bringing in around between 30 to 40 million US dollars, which is quite a small amount. But the opportunity cost is much more. And the other thing is also he has promised a 10% tax on any country leaning towards BRICS. That is also another front that we need to be quite careful about. Before the 1st of August, I would say that committing to eliminating para-tariffs would be one thing and committing to reducing duties on American goods would be another thing.
Leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa, warns that despite the reduction, US reciprocal tariffs on Sri Lanka would have a severe impact towards key sectors of the country's economy, including the textile, tea and rubber industries, exacerbating economic concerns, including poverty. Meanwhile, attention was drawn in the political sphere to the disadvantage Sri Lankan manufacturers face due to the country's higher electricity tariffs and labour costs, even compared to regional competitors facing higher US tariffs.
Some might say that there is no critical impact from US reciprocal tariffs imposed on the country, which were decreased from 44% to 30%. We are certainly happy about the reduction. However, we must ask if the government took the best measures regarding this issue. Various sectors of our country's economy, including apparel, rubber and tea, will face a severe impact. There is a significant chance that poverty will increase due to job losses and factory closures. We are not confident about the representatives who held discussions with the US government. If they worked on a program to address the country's $2.6 billion deficit, I believe we would have a way to solve this issue and opportunity to arrive at a better solution. Professor Anil Jayantha did not really care about this matter thoroughly and stated, with no knowledge regarding other countries' trade discussions, that our country will receive a favorable outcome and assure the people not to worry about it. It is not suitable to say that we received the 30% tariff rate due to the government's failure. The whole of Asia is facing this issue, and what will happen is that trade and production will be weakened, especially in small nations, which can create a path to a massive economic crisis. Since we have a lower tariff rate compared to Bangladesh, we can use this opportunity. Since the US has different tariff policies regarding different countries, we can negotiate and continue our journey. This is not the end. This is the commencement of our discussions. We must use our skills and work on it. Even though Bangladesh received a higher tariff rate, the prices of their finished products are much lower compared to Sri Lanka. That's because electricity tariffs and labour costs in Bangladesh are low. There are some situations in the country where we have to leave politics aside and come forward for the country's sake. Hence, what I can say to the President and the government is that we must use the benefit of this opportunity. Once again, we must immediately start the negotiations with the Trump administration. Meanwhile, taking to X, leader of Sarojana Balaya, parliamentarian Dilip Jayawira, said the 30% tariff underscores the need for Sri Lanka to create a self-reliant, globally relevant economy. Jayawira suggested that the government adopt the entrepreneurial state concept from Sarojana Balaya's strategic plan for national survival.
The Milk Powder Importers Association today announced a price increase for imported milk powder. According to the association, the price of a 400-gram pack of imported milk powder has been increased by 100 rupees. In the meantime, the price of a 1 kilogram imported milk powder pack has been increased by 250 rupees. Speaking to Ada Derana, spokesperson of the Milk Powder Importers Association, Ashok Bandara said the decision was taken in view of the fact that global milk prices have increased by 30 to 35% during the last 6 months. He further said benefits of future reductions in global milk prices will be passed on to local consumers.
Apico Next Gen. Make the leap to faster sleep.
Welcome back. Global markets showed mixed reactions following the United States announcement of revised reciprocal tariff rates. Wall Street closed higher, while in Europe, major indices rose on signs of progress in US-EU trade talks. However, Asian and Gulf markets experienced mixed reactions. After the announcement of revised reciprocal tariff rates by the United States, global markets reacted with largely mixed responses. Wall Street indices closed higher today, led by the tech-heavy Nasdaq, with Nvidia briefly reaching a $4 trillion valuation, becoming the world's first company to reach the milestone. Nvidia's performance helped the Nasdaq close at an all-time high. European shares rose today, buoyed by signs of progress on a potential trade deal between the United States and the European Union. The Pan-European Stoxx 600 index was up 0.6%, while the United Kingdom's FTSE 100 rose 1.1% to touch a fresh record high. Germany's DAX also rose 0.2% to hit a record high, as it continues to outperform the Stoxx 600 year-to-date. France's CAC 40 rose 0.7%, while Spain's IBEX fell 0.6%. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, in Asia, Japan experienced losses with declines in the paper and pulp, transport and communication sectors, causing the Nikkei 225 to fall by 0.37%. In contrast, Chinese stocks closed higher, with the benchmark Shanghai Composite Index rising 0.48%, while the Shenzhen Component Index closed 0.47% higher. Meanwhile, major stock markets in the Gulf saw mixed reactions in early trade today as investors assessed the potential impact of US President Donald Trump's tariffs on global economic growth. Saudi Arabia's benchmark index TASI edged 0.1% higher, while Dubai's main index, the DFMGI, added 0.1%. However, in Abu Dhabi, the index fell 0.2%. That's all for tonight from First at 9. For the latest developments around the clock, stay in touch with Ada Derana, the Sri Lankan news brand of international excellence. Thank you for joining. Have a great night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit adaderana.lk.